in 1775, the rebels were stockpiling guns and ammunition. They were getting ready for war. But the British were onto them. British troops were ordered to go to seize and destroy weapons that were being stored in the Massachusetts towns of Lexington and Concord. The American patriots got wind of the British plan, so they set up a signalling system. When the British mobilised, lanterns would appear in the tower at the North Church here in Boston. One lantern meant that the British were marching to Concord. Two meant that they were travelling by boat. At the signal, a patriot would ride through the countryside to alert the local militia. Paul Revere was a local craftsman. That night, he would become a folk hero. Paul Revere is celebrated as the single courageous hero who rode through the night to warn the Americans that the British were coming. But this is actually something of a fib. And it was all cooked up by one of America's greatest poets. In 1860, 85 years after the event, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a stirring poem about Revere's ride. It's been learnt by generations of American school kids.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
But the poem isn't the only version of the story. Revere himself described his ride in a statement made soon after the event. He then wrote a more elaborate version 23 years later. In each retelling of the story, though, events become more dramatic and Revere takes a different route. In the poem, Revere sees the signal in the church tower and sets off, a lone rider in the moonlit night. The fate of history is in one man's hands. But according to Revere's own account, there's a second rider, Mr. Dawes. Revere rode north of the British route to avoid discovery, while Dawes rode to the south of it. After stopping at Lexington to warn rebel leaders, they then headed towards Concord with a third man. But poetry prefers a solitary hero, David taking on Goliath. Longfellow's poem takes Paul Revere, the lone hero, step by step through the Massachusetts countryside. By 1 a.m. he reaches Lexington. 2 a.m. he gets to Concord. Hooray! He's in time to wake the sleeping locals. Mission accomplished. Now here's a funny thing. If you look at Revere's own accounts, this is one of them, you discover that he never actually made it to Concord that night, because after leaving Lexington, he was captured by the British. In reality, it was the third rider who warned Concord that the British were on the march. But Longfellow's poetic version guaranteed a place in history for Paul Revere. The morning after Revere's ride, the local militia in Lexington were ready and waiting for the British. But the British army overwhelmed the rebels. A company of British soldiers then marched to the bridge in the neighbouring town of Concord. By the time the British got to the bridge, there were 500 militiamen waiting for them on this side, and battle broke out. The British had only sent 100 soldiers. They were pretty soon outnumbered, overpowered, and they began to retreat back towards Boston.